Three Russian prisoners freed as part of a major prisoner swap on Thursday have held a press conference at DW's headquarters here in Germany. Opposition activists of Vladimir Kara-Murza, Ilya Yashin and Andrei Pivovarov told of their experiences in Russian prison and their shock at suddenly being released.
It is the second time that I think I am in a film. I see some kind of film going on a big screen before me. I was in Siberia just a week ago. Yesterday we were in a Rapporteur prison, and then we are here now at a press conference on the wonderful Rhine River. It's like surreal, that thing that is happening to us. Yesterday I also thought about all the questions that would come our way, and I thought, had I been not on this list, I would be still sitting in Karelia in my prison cell, and if I had heard about this event, I would have known that this is an encouragement also to those who are still there in prison. It's a sign of light, in a way. There's thousands of people that are still in Russian prisons, and they have to suffer terrible conditions. And I think they would be happy to hear that it's possible to be saved. I am never going to play the role of an immigrant. My goal is to return to Russia. I am a citizen of Russia. I am a Russian politician. I am a Russian patriot. My goal is to have a free and happy Russia. All my efforts will be towards getting back to my home country in order to help to bring about a prosperous, happy, free Russia. This is what I dedicated my life for, and I'm going to continue to do that, dedicate my life for Russia.
Well, Mariana Katzarova is UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Russian Federation. She joins us from Geneva. Welcome to DW. Can we start with your reaction to this prisoner exchange that included Russian dissidents being given sanctuary here in Germany?
I'm really happy. It was an amazing positive news in the midst of really awful news about human rights violations coming out of Russia every day. It's amazing to know that now Vladimir Kara-Murza, Ilya Yashin, also Kurmasheva, Evan Gershkovich, and all the 16 prisoners will be free after being given in sham trials, totally on fabricated charges, lengthy prison sentences. So yes, it's a positive news, but of course, it reminded me, and even listening to just now to the three who gave press conference, Kara-Murza, Yashin and Pivovarov today in Germany, it reminded me really how important it is for us to continue advocating for the release of all political prisoners in Russia. Over 1,300 political prisoners are still in Russia, and their amount is getting bigger, of course, every day. We don't know even the exact number. How important it is that this exchange is just the first sign, the first positive news, but that there is a continuation. And I think governments, and particularly the ones who have been involved in this exchange, and all others, members of the United Nations, should unite efforts and use all the offices to advocate for their release with the Russian government.
And is this release, this exchange, do you think it's likely to create some sort of a path for others, those other more than 1,000 who are still being held in Russian prisons?
I believe pressure should be put on the Russian authorities to fulfill their obligations. While these exchanges are really exclusively prerogative of governments, and it's a diplomatic action that has been undertaken between several governments, a massive diplomatic action to negotiate this release, These exchanges are not something that is a regular occurrence. This is, something that is happening really as extraordinary measure. But what I'm advocating for and have been advocating is for other states, for Germany, for the European Union, for United States, UN member states, to put pressure on the Russian government to release the rest of the political prisoners who shouldn't be there in the first place. So I do believe it's a pathway.
Okay, and so where do you stand on the morality of these sorts of deals? Swapping what the Kremlin swapping spies and murderers for political prisoners and journalists?
Look, I'm not God to judge the morality of actions, whether a human life needs to be saved or a human life needs to be given. This is really not for us to judge. All I can say is I know who these people are who were released, and these are innocent journalists, activists, people who oppose the war against Ukraine. Look, daily for 2.5 years, Ukrainian civilians have been murdered in Ukraine in this massive attack on their country. People in Russia, activists, journalists, human rights defenders who stood up against the war have been paying the price for speaking against the war as Russians. And I think many of them in really poor health condition, some of them facing death, like Navalny already died in detention. And several of these released yesterday were the ones that I thought would be next. Like Vladimir Kara-Murza, who has a very serious health condition. And he was sentenced to 19 years imprisonment only for writing an article against the war in Ukraine. I think these are brave individuals. These are the bravest among us. I'm Bulgarian, I'm not Russian, but I mean among us in the world who spoke up in the face of grave danger, paid the price, and it's a miracle that they're alive today and they're free. So I think this is the biggest morality of this story. And I, of course, understand the concerns of the family of the killed Chechen field commander in Germany. I was reading today. But even I was really pleasantly surprised to see that the brother of the killed Chechen commander, killed by Krasikov, a member of the Secret Service of Russia, who was the key person exchanged yesterday for the innocent men. This is exactly what the brother said. Innocent men were exchanged for Krasikov. And I think he was trying to say that there is a deep morality in this, that these innocent people will be now.
Thank you for that. Maria Katzarova, UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Russian Federation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin has admitted that some of the 8 prisoners released on Thursday by Western countries in the swap were intelligence agents. Chief amongst them was Vladimir Krasikov, who'd been convicted of murder here in Berlin. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said the decision to release him was a difficult one.
A success for Joe Biden, a triumph for Vladimir Putin, and Germany's Olaf Scholz played a big role.
The Chancellor was incredible.
And a key figure in the biggest prisoner swap since the Cold War. But he didn't really feel like celebrating.
It was not easy.
And that is all because of one man, Vadim Krasikov, a convicted murderer. 24 adults and 2 children were part of the exchange involving multiple countries. But it only happened because Germany released the Tiergarten killer. Krasikov, an elite operative with Russia's FSB security agency, was serving a life sentence for killing a former Chechen militant in a Berlin park in 2019, an assassination ordered by the Kremlin. Chancellor Scholz said the German government had to weigh the state's interest in enforcing Krasikov's prison sentence against the liberty of innocent imprisoned people.
I think it was the right decision, and if you had any doubts, you will lose them after talking to those who are now free.
Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock admitted that the government's move will rightly lead to much discussion. A discussion on whether it is right to release a convicted murderer to free innocent people.
I'm afraid that going forward, this will be used as a means of blackmailing Germany and the world.
Russia is still imprisoning a number of political dissidents.
I don't want to speculate about another exchange just now, because this should definitely not become a business model for the West. It is important to protect our own citizens, but also the people who live as dissidents in the West, not only in Germany, but also in the US. And this includes those individuals who have just been released.
As Krasikov's case shows, country borders do not necessarily provide safety for Moscow's opponents.
Now, Hugh Dugan is a former acting special envoy for hostage affairs in the US, also a former US diplomat. Welcome to DW. How do you think a deal like this, 24 prisoners, 2 children and something like 7 countries, how is a deal like that put together?
Well, it's probably more complicated than that. What we do know is what you just described. Obviously, is taking a lot of, so to speak, triangulation, not just between the U.S. and Russia, but involving other countries. And Germany is a well part of that triangulation. And our country should give a special thanks to Germany for what they provided in this instance. Just to say that Germany and Norway and Slovenia and others' interests were somewhat compromised and also need to be rectified throughout the future. So there's really no end, so to speak, to the deal that took place, because equities exist at that poker table. And while they're playing that game and the excitement gets great, you find people standing behind them making side bets on each other. So we can't even begin to, so to speak, unravel all of these different aspects. But just to say that the end result, I believe, has benefited Putin more than anybody else.
Oh, really? Why do you say that?
It's given him a great deal of propaganda publicity opportunity. If you remember, the U.S. paid $6 billion to receive 5 Americans from Iran last year, 5 Americans held as hostages there, 1.2 billion ahead. So obviously this deal, under that market condition, that type of a price point, under this deal, it must have been worth at least $6 billion or more dollars to Putin in-kind benefits. And one of those is the prospect that he can help keep Donald Trump out of office, because we've already heard him say he does not want to have to deal with him in the future. So perhaps part of the benefit is to enable Putin to remain with a democratic administration in Washington, which he seems to feel is easier to deal with from his perspective.
Do you believe this deal should not have been done?
I can't second guess anything as complicated as this from afar. I haven't been in this role for a few years. I'm very happy on the humanitarian aspect. Of course, we want to see people repatriated. We want them with their families. But we can't be too happy with this. We must be indignant about why this happened in the first place, and the disturbing pattern over the last 10 to 15 years that Russia and China have increased the taking, wrongful detention of foreigners to gain political advantage over foreign policy interests abroad. That's the real game here. When somebody is taken overseas, and then that is linked to extorting foreign policy interests from our country, that is truly called a wrongful detention or a hostage situation. And when that comes into play, we all pay a great price. So we need to remain indignant that this happens in our civilization, that something as inhumane and brutal, such as taking a person like this, occurs, and that it's being used more frequently as a diplomatic device by countries which otherwise have diplomatic relations with us.
One of the big Putin wins in this is Vladimir Kara-Murza, the assassin who was jailed in Germany. The German government did not want to release him, and yet it did. What do you think made the Germans change their mind?
Well, as I said at the opening, we have to give Germany a a big thanks and for their cooperation, for their partnership throughout this and over time. When I served as our special presidential envoy for hostage affairs, I went to Germany and we actually met with colleagues over there in the same offices, so to speak. We were exchanging our lessons learned and trying to learn from each other and collaborate. So that goes back 4 and 5 years. So Germany, among all of the countries that I visited on that basis, was the most sophisticated and in sync with what we were trying to do to establish a fixed bureaucracy in Washington that will deal with hostage affairs on a standing basis and not merely scramble in the middle of the night when we have the news that another hostage has been taken. So I know the German ministry has been thoughtful and deliberate throughout its consideration of this, I'm sure, having worked with them in the past. And to some extent, their foreign policy interests had to be addressed, and they must be at least an acceptable level to them to have this outcome. As I say, there are other players that we may not know or see, side bets, other aspects that could reverberate back to compensate somehow Germany's generosity and their support in the humane retrieval of these people, and also of the other dissidents who are now released.
OK, good talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Hugh Dugan, former US Special Envoy for Hostage Issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's the United States and Germany ticked off our list. What's going on in Russia? Well, our former Moscow bureau chief, Yuri Rescheto, joins us now from Riga, since DW has been banned from reporting in Russia. Welcome, Yuri. What sort of reception have Russia's freed prisoners received?
Well, look, Phil, in Russia, this prisoner swap is also the topic #1 in the media. But as is so often the case, you simply have to turn our Western view by 180 degrees to learn how Russia sees the world. In other words, who the West celebrates, we saw it, is condemned in Russia, which means the Russian political prisoners who are now in Germany or in the United States or in Germany are at least officially considered traitors who belong behind bars. Former President Medvedev wrote on Telegram, "It would have been better if traitors had died in jail. Let them now protect themselves under the witness protection program." That is a clear threat of murder. By contrast, now to your question, other Russians who have returned to Russia from Western prisons are celebrated as big heroes.
OK. Just on the point that you raised there, it slightly chilled me there. So even though this deal has been done, they are not necessarily safe, those Russian dissidents.
Well, I think that the whole world saw last night that Putin personally welcomed these people at Vnukovo airport. There was a big red carpet, there were flowers from the president, and he even personally hugged almost all of them. In this way, he showed that these people were not simply criminals, but random Russians who were in Western prisons for some real crime, but that they were very special people. And among those special people, there was probably one particularly special one, so to speak, that was Vadim Krasikov, known as the murderer of Tiergarten. Why does a president give a murderer a hug? Probably because he is an important associate.
So what happens to them now?
They will be honored, they will be awarded in the Kremlin. Putin promised them to give them medals on the highest level, so I think we'll see them soon in the Kremlin in a big ceremony.
The Kremlin admitted for the first time that 3 of the exchanged Russian prisoners in the West were spies. Why make this admission now?
Well, I think that Putin had admit already with this very welcoming ceremony at the airport that these people are very special people, and it was an admission already, and now it is official. The whole world saw this yesterday, and the Kremlin just said what we already knew. So it was. Once again, we will see soon in the Kremlin the big ceremony of honoring that people.
And what about Russian political prisoners who are still behind bars? Can they hope to be freed?
I don't think so. According to Russian human rights activists, there are currently almost 1,400 politically motivated cases in Russia. So many people have to suffer because they disagree with the policies of the state and openly show it. They are still behind bars. Many of them have draconian sentences. In recent years, since the start of the war in Ukraine, Russia has even passed many new laws that continue to restrict freedom of expression. So it's very good that a few of the political prisoners have now been released, but they are only a few.
OK, thank you for that. Yuri Rescheto in Riga.